Madhvi Gokool from AFRINIC. Some of you know me from a long time. Some of you will know me from now. Please feel free to reach out if you have anything to discuss about policies at AFRINIC. So what I do at AFRINIC right now, I'm the policy liaison, and I also have the title of Senior IP Resources Specialist that covers other duties. So what I'm here today, and thank you SAFNOG for bringing us together after this pandemic. We've missed you, and yeah, when we follow webinars, we were not actually seeing who's connected or not. So happy to be here. So let's start. Now, AFRINIC is the regional internet registry. So what we do is we manage a pool of resources for network operators. Okay, network operators, I mean ISPs, banks, universities, data centers, an office that wants to be connected to the internet, all right? So any organization comes to AFRINIC and requests for resources so that because they want to connect themselves or their customers to the internet. So this is started this, sorry about that. So this slide will actually show that up to now, since 2005, AFRINIC has issued over 115 million of IP addresses, and that we still have some IP addresses available, 1.4 million, and that we have some reservations, what we call policy reserved IPv4, which is around 1.2 million of IP addresses. We also have ASN, so for those who are doing interconnection, so the AS numbers, they have jumped to more than 2,000 ASNs as of now, and also we have issued more than 9,000 to nearly 10,000 /32 IPv6 prefixes, but not to 10,000 organizations. Basically, some organizations have deployed IPv6 extensively, and they they determined that they needed bigger prefixes to connect their customers. So some stats that I got from member services is that at a couple of days ago, we still have roughly around 100 new resource member requests and 74 additional IPv4 resource requests that are pending evaluation, meaning not yet approved. And one of the reasons, so when I asked what's the reason, so we need more supporting information from those organizations to ensure compliance with the existing implemented policies. Now, what is a policy? What is the CPM? You know, that's a consolidated policy manual that AFRINIC staff refer to, and that most of the time network operators don't read. Why is AFRINIC asking for justification of IP addressing needs when we only want to connect our customers? Okay, we need more IPs, but we can only get a /22, 1,000 IP addresses. I have, some of them have existing allocations, but they don't know that they can come to AFRINIC and actually get some more IPs. Why are they receiving communication from AFRINIC that they are not in compliance with a specific policy? Okay, why can't they create a domain objects on the WHOIS database? Now they're deploying networks and they're getting errors from the member portal. Why all this? You know, what mistake could they have done? Sometimes it's not a mistake, it's just that they're not policy compliant. So let's delve in. What are these resource policies? So the resource policies are the guidelines that enable AFRINIC to manage and distribute this IP address, resources, public IP resources that it has. It's just a custodian of these IPs. It did not buy the IP addresses. It got them from ICANN or IANA, sorry, PTI now, okay? And the policies are actually developed, all right? sorry, I've been moving the slides in. Yeah. So they've been developed using a bottom-up approach. It's not AFRINIC board or AFRINIC staff who sit down and say, how will we manage these resources now, right? We don't build the roads. In fact, it's the bottom-up policy development process usually comes with someone in the AFRINIC community. Question, are you in the AFRINIC community? A show of hands, please. Okay. For those who have not raised their hands, I'm hoping that by the end of SAFNOG, you would be interested and feel part of the AFRINIC community, all right? So yes, it consists of individuals who will actually take time, find a problem statement, think about solution, brainstorm with others sometimes to find a potential solution and write and submit what we call a policy proposal. Right? And yeah, so the proposal is usually submitted to a mailing list, all right, where the discussions will start with other people on the mailing list, what we call them, the Policy Development Working Group. Then there will be a presentation at an AFRINIC public policy meeting, and the consensus will be determined, all right. And if there's consensus, these policies go up to the board for ratification, and after ratification, they will come down to staff to implement. So in order for all the network operators, all the AFRINIC resource members to know where the policies are, when I first joined in AFRINIC, I was reading about 20 different policies. Now they're all in a manual, so what we call the Consolidated Policy Manual, CPM in short. Any change in the text written in, in the Consolidated Policy Manual needs to go through the policy development process itself. We can't just go in and remove a line there. No, it has to go through the policy development process for that to happen, and of course, a discussion, etc. Okay, and upon implementation, once we inform our community and members that the policy has been implemented, now that policy will apply indiscriminately to the resource members, okay, who are coming, or even the potential members who are coming now to get additional resources. We have, so both of the policies are resource policies, but we do have the AFRINIC policy development process, which is a policy on its own. So if we want to change the rules of how the policy development process should happen at AFRINIC, there needs to be a policy proposal that gets submitted, discussed, okay, and go through the consensus determination and then ratification before it can be implemented. Then we have policies around the other services that we offer. For example, we have a reverse DNS policy. We have lame delegations policy. We also have an RPKI AS0 policy at the moment, which is under implementation. So, and that policy requests AFRINIC to cover its unallocated and unassigned space with an AS0 ROA. So that is currently under implementation. So we have more work to do, okay? As there is an evolution in the policies, then AFRINIC, when ratification, then AFRINIC needs to implement those policies. Sometimes the implementation can happen very quickly through a change of process and procedures, but sometimes for some resource, from some technical policies, I would say, then we have some coding, so usually it will take at least 6 months for that to happen, and then we'll announce implementation. Very rarely we announce implementation like partially, because some of the work can be done manually, all right? But in case it needs to be fully coded, we have to wait until it's coded, tested, it works well, before announcing it to our members. Right, so compliance with these policies, how many of you have read the Consolidated Policy Manual? How many of you read a section of that manual? Okay. You know what? I would seriously tell all those who read a section of that manual to read that manual together. Lesson learned, honestly, believe me. Now that everything's put together, sometimes when we have these brainstorming sessions, we like, don't forget, there is this part here, and it's not where we're reading, it's way down at the bottom. Last week, we presented at AFBIF. Now, for the exchange points, for example, everyone thinks Section 11 of the CPM covers exchange points. Nope. There's another section, which was there before. I think it's 5.7 something, all right? Another, no, 5.6, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But there's another section there that covers exchange points as well. And that's how NAP Africa got its resources, in fact. I was scratching my head, but it was two policies come together, two sections of the CPM come together, and sometimes then that makes the member compliant. Wouldn't know about that. We have to figure out, because the policies are not written in a language that we understand. I rephrase that. It's not written by us. So when you write something, you know what you're writing. So it's written by people in the community. And during the debates, what we do now is the impact assessments, etc. So we do now to cover the bases, and where there's ambiguity, we go back to the authors and inform them. Because so that when it's in a manual, still work in progress, when it's a manual, when you all will be reading that manual, you would actually understand. It's in English. It takes a bit of focus and understanding to actually get to the crux of the matter. Yeah, so some of the benefits, and I'm saying this based on what we've observed as well, right? That it engages the AFRINIC community in developing the rules of managing resources. There's a transparent, bottom-up, and open approach. If you're interested in AFRINIC's history, go back to the archives. All the policy discussions since 2005 are actually in the archives. RPD mailing list is open for resource policy discussion. Anyone can subscribe. Anyone can make their contributions to the discussions that are happening. So it enables AFRINIC to manage its resources in a consistent manner, right? And I would say it enables proactive management of internet resources, but for the benefit of these operators, of the network operators, all right? Latecomer, sorry, but if they're starting now, I would call them a latecomer. A latecomer now can still come to AFRINIC and get some IPv4 along with plenty of IPv6 and the ASN and go and deploy their network. Why is that? Because we had the soft landing policy, which was developed by someone in the community, agreed by the community, there was consensus there. And when we reached the last /8, in fact, that was in 2017. So 16 million in 2017, we're down to 1.5 million in 2022. Enough for any newcomers. But then the policy is not restricting for newcomers only. So a network operator, all right, that needs more IP resources. Your customers are growing, right? Pandemic, thank you, COVID, all right? So your customers are growing, you still need IPv4, you can come to AFRINIC and get a small portion of the 1.5 million that's available. We've had intra-RIR transfer policies that allow transfers of resources, of IPv4 resources between organizations. Was checking the stats yesterday, 20 intra, so within the region, between organizations within the region, 20 intra-RIR transfers since 2018. That's when we announced implementation of that policy. The IXP community came and requested for a reservation of 2/16s. That was in 2015 or so, and which we implemented. So since then, 36 IPv4 prefixes have been issued in in the 196.60/16 range, because that's when we reserved it, that block, according to policy. But of course, we have more exchange points in the region, and they were getting it from another block, the 196.223. Well, I would expecting them to renumber to this block, but they have not. But the policy is quite lenient on this one. So you can renumber to this block, you get your /24, and the policy mandates AFRINIC to reserve another /24 for growth of the exchange points, which is a good thing in my opinion. So until and unless that policy changes, exchange points would have a reserved IPv4 block for them. And then the soft lending policy asked us to reserve 1/12 for future use as yet unforeseen. And this has been done. So that's why in the first slide, when you saw 1.5 million of IP addresses that have been policy reserved, what we call policy reserved, so that one has been set aside. So no one can touch it unless the policy changes. In fact, there has been an update or an evolution to this policy. So someone in the community proposed an idea that should AFRINIC complete the allocations in what we have as available at the moment. So should we finish this available pool, then that /12 can move to the available pool, and then we continue issuing from them. So the policies also provide a visibility regarding the availability and the conditions. And we've seen the evolution that there has been a limit to the maximum amount of IP addresses that could be issued to the members that come and request for it. Apologies for the large operators. You may have a need for 500,000 IPs, but you'll only get a /22,000 because of the policy. But they can always come back for additional resource requests. But that is time-consuming and resource-consuming as well. That's what they told me, right? And so some evolutions in the policies. Some of you here at one point in time may have requested for one IPv6 prefix, but then when you're actually deploying it, you feel that you need more, okay? And the process at that time was a bit tricky, so you actually had to return the IP, and then we look at the justification, and then we issue you another prefix. Guess what? Now it's in the policy. So any member can come to AFRINIC and say, I got a /32 from you 5 years ago. Now that I'm deploying IPv6, I need a /28. Here's my justification. The policy allows any organization to increase the prefix size. So if there is available, we can simply increase your /32 to a 28. Otherwise, we will issue you another 28. So you don't have to justify for additional allocations under V6. So because of this policy, so I think it's been 2 years, I think, since we have implemented it. The ASN policy had some evolutions. We had members or organizations not being eligible to get an ASN because they only had one upstream provider. And the policy was said, you need to at least, be multi-homed or planning to be multi-homed. So when we gave that input back to the community, we had an author, someone in the community, who said, let's tweak this requirement. So we were discussing this with James from Member Services. So the numbers, it's been 2 years since we've implemented them. So there has been a steeper increase in the ASNs that have been issued to organizations. So even if you have one upstream provider and they ask you for a public AS number, you can come after to AFRINIC, justify for it, and get it. Yeah. So I've put up this slide thinking that, okay, sorry, I was reading a different slide here. So the mailing list is rpd@afrinic.net. I've given you the link where you can look at the archives, and I have some stats later in the slides, so I'll show you something. Now, how to participate? You subscribe, you go through the policy discussions, and we've tried to put up the guideline as to how someone can contribute. You go through the proposal, look at the problem statement. Is it clear to you? If it's not clear to you, you can always request the author, can you please clarify? I mean, start the discussion around it, okay? Does the problem solve a problem that you're experiencing? If yes, say so, all right? Now, if you know it's solving a problem, but you see that the solution is incomplete, how about proposing something? I would, as someone in the community, the author is, some authors just say that they are the custodian then of the policy. They just the scribe, right? So they can take inputs from the community and go back and update their proposal, right? Because at the end of the day, what they want is consensus within the community, right? So if you oppose, please say so, but then when opposing a policy, clearly state the reasons why and state them objectively, all right? And of course, if the proposal can be enhanced by removing ambiguous text or reinforcing the solutions, please feel free to mention them. Reason why, especially for resource policies, right? Who uses the resources? Who uses the public internet resources? Show of hands. Okay, you do. All right, so I'm just gonna show you this, right? These are the stats. Took me a while, but now we're there. More than 1,200 subscribers to the RPD mailing list. How many resource members are actually subscribed to that list? Roughly 100. How many resource members does AFRINIC have? More than 2,000. Okay. How many participants, so unique posters on the list? 260. How many top participants? Look at the numbers there. I read the names. Sometimes we know what the day job of those persons are. Are they network operators? Very few of them are network operators. Very few of them represent you all here who actually use the resources and deploy them. Okay. So that's food for thought for you. And we seriously encouraged our resource members because they are the ones who to whom the resource policies eventually apply to, all right? Your organizations may be facilitated or may be hampered by the resource policies that come into play. And yeah, we are trying to reach out. There are some plans regarding reaching out to the members to tell them about the policies that are coming in our landscape. But most of the time, and it's been like that, that you only get to know about the policies once they are implemented. And once you are faced, oh, the rules have changed. Oh, and you think it was being done this way, why are they asking for something else now? That's because of the change in policies. I put up a slide for rough consensus because it's not a voting mechanism, all right? We have two PDWG chairs who are selected from the community, okay? And for them, the way they proceed is that determination of consensus is a process, and it's not a voting mechanism. What they try and determine is whether there's actually rough consensus in the community on those proposals. So even if you have a minority of participants who have a valid objection, okay, the objections must be dealt with before rough consensus can be declared. But if we have a minority of people, let's say 5 people are for a policy, and 100 people may be against, people, we mean community members, may be against the policy, there could still be rough consensus as long as there are no valid objections that have not been addressed. Yeah, so the operators could have likely missed out on the topic of resource policies. Yeah, they failed to properly manage their resources and become ineligible for additional resource requests, leading to delays while they have a customer base waiting there to be connected. They learn about the policies at the time of submitting their resource requests. They don't understand the error messages when they're managing their resources, and they also have no clue about the non-compliance email notifications that are addressed to them. They So this slide, we're showing that, right, so we have 4 policies here that reached consensus. One of them has been ratified by the board earlier this year, and it's undergoing implementation, the RPKI ROA. And the other 3 reached consensus. They were under appeal. We've heard from the appeal committee. Now they are awaiting a ratification by the AFRINIC board. And all of these 3 policies are in fact resource policies, technical policies, that will have a direct impact on the resource members. AFRINIC staff will be reaching out to you once we start the implementation, or as we move through the implementation, to prepare you for these changes. Well, in case these policies get ratified. So once we start the implementation, then we'll have to reach out and prepare the membership for these policies while they are, so that when they are implemented, you are at least ready, you know what's coming your way. If you want more information about the policies, they are on the website, and you have any questions regarding those policies until we leave, so we're here until tomorrow, please feel free to reach out. Now, way forward, resource policies are important. It forms the basis of how we manage the resources. You've had peers from this community. Yes, there have been some community members from the Southern African region who did a great job in proposing policies, etc. Now, we need more people to get involved. We need the network operators to be involved, because resource policies, at the end of the day, they impact on either your organization or your customers. And so if you think about whether you're interested now to have a say in the resource policies development at AFRINIC. Do you know where you can start your involvement? All right, when you read that consolidated policy manual, okay, do you feel that it has, the way it's written, does it cover for the evolution that you have seen, you have experienced, and also for the evolution that you think will happen in the future, okay, in regard to policy, resource management in the region, all right? If the manual, you think if there are certain sections that need harmonization, then please feel free. You can be an author of a policy. You can reach out to your peers here to help you, or you can also reach out to the policy liaison team at AFRINIC, because it's written in the CPM. We may assist, so that's how we can, it's written there, so we can. If you ask us for assistance, we'll help you. I've put down an email address here. And then we also here, we have a booth here, so if you have further questions regarding policy development, regarding your resource request, or anything that may impact you, please come and meet us. All right? Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Madhvi. Before you go, are there any questions? I'm sure there are. Okay, do we have a mic, please? I just want to say, while we're waiting, the AFRINIC mailing lists are always a fun place to be. Not so much since Andrew Alston found something else to do with the IETF. So.
Hi, yeah. My name's Alan Levine. I'm from Vanilla. Madhvi made it out to look quite romantic. And I think there was a more realistic comment there. It's war out there. And I do think that we maybe need to understand how long the board's going to take to pass those 4 policies. They're all quite important policies that we've worked on for many, many, many years. I think abuse contact specifically is more than 10 years we've been trying to get that to go. And maybe you want to talk a little bit about abuse contact. I think that's a very important one.
Now, how long the war is going to take, honestly, I don't have the answer to that. But while the war is happening there, the registry keeps on functioning. Okay, we're busy connecting. We're busy managing the registry at the moment. So resource members or organizations that have a need for IPs, they're coming, they're getting the help, and they're going out. Of course, there is some extra positive energy that has to go into the work so that to manage the situation, but it is what it is. Now, yes, there are 3 policies that are awaiting board ratification. They are technical policies. And the CPM helps us with that. In fact, the CPM says that implementation shall be within 6 months of last call. So since the technical policies and we are adopting the agility in the organization, so at least on the technical side, we can have conversations around how those policy proposals can be implemented in case they are ratified, okay? Because there would be a gap between now and the ratification period. And we don't want these policies to drag on, the implementation to drag on. So we will prepare for the implementation, put aside, not put aside, identify resources available, etc. And once we have a board reconstituted, those would be the first, we'll try and have those to be the first items on the agenda for the board to look at. And once they ratify, then we will deploy. Now, if we put yourself in your situation, okay, if you're waiting, for the word go, right? And when you are deploying or when you want to connect your customers. So we will go in that mode so that once we have the approval, the implementation will start. Now, the other question is regarding the abuse contact. Yes, abuse contact was optional, was an opt-in. 10 years ago, when I joined AFRINIC, the policy had already been discussed, if I'm not mistaken. And it was optional. Very few members were adopting it. Okay, Alan was one of those diehards who said, I want to have an abuse contact. There's a very few number of organizations among our members who have adopted the abuse contact. This version of the abuse contact policy will make it mandatory for you. Okay, so you'll be given time for you to comply with this policy. So basically what it says is that you need to have an abuse contact, and that whoever queries the WHOIS database will actually see that who they should report the abuse to. And of course, there are some conditions as to, that abuse contact needs to be manned by a person, not just an email address that you've created there and you've put in. No one is manning it, so everything is just going to what you call Dave Null. It cannot be like that, all right? So, yeah, basically that's it. If you want more questions about the abuse, come to the desk. I'm around. we can look at the policy together and go through it with you.
Although for present purposes I should disclose that I also represent Crystal Web, so that's something worth disclosing at this juncture. Just wanting to point out that, yeah, you mentioned the policy manual's requirement for 6 months for implementation. There is not a constituted board. I cannot see how a constituted board will be in place within 6 months from the last call. Are contingency measures being put in place to deal with the fact that there is no ability to ratify policy documents because there is no constituted board, and the 6-month clock is very quickly running out on several of those policy documents? It creates an implementation nightmare if there isn't something or another done on that. Thank you.
Well, yes, so the manual says we have, the policy says the implementation needs to happen within 6 months of last call, yes. And when it concerns procedures and processes amendments, that can happen quickly. So what we always do now is when we do the impact assessment, we do assess whether it will take more time, and we disclose it before the policy has even reached consensus. So at the time of discussion during the impact assessments, we usually inform the community of how long that will take. Because sometimes some policies may take, may require, let's say, an extra $200,000, for example. So if that happens, then we put it forward to the community. The implementation of this policy is at a cost, and this is the cost. Now, it's up to the community to decide whether the policy is useful or not to AFRINIC. So we wait for that. Now, yes, like I said, governance, the board, we don't know what's happening. So these policies have been lined up, all right? Well, they were lined up at appeal. Now that the appeal committee made themselves the report known, now they are lined up for ratification. So operations-wise, yes, it is what I call a bottleneck. Right, while we wait, there's a waiting game, but it is what it is. Thank you.
Andrew Wilston here, Liquid Telecom. Madhvi, and since Alan Levine kind of alluded to this, I want to ask you to talk a little bit about what AFRINIC is doing with regards to code of conduct enforcement on those lists. Because, as somebody said, I've been very quiet on those lists. We left the lists. All of them, because of the code of conduct and lack of enforcement across the lists. The lists have become so toxic and so much vitriol and bile appearing on those lists that it simply wasn't worth being on them anymore. And so I'd like to hear from AFRINIC, what are they planning on doing to clean up the antagonistic and really the vitriol going on those lists? Because if you're asking people to participate, I don't want to participate in an environment that is filled with that much, garbage, quite frankly. So what is AFRINIC doing about the code of conduct on those lists?
All right, so excellent question, Andrew. And you got me in the spot. Well, so there has been always a code of conduct, but enforcement, well, now we have feedback from you and it's on record as well, yes. So some members of the community have left our mailing list for that reason, because the discussions that happen there are not conducive, they're not positive, all right? So at least now, closer to what I do, what I've seen on the RPD mailing list, the same code of conduct is applied. Sometimes we do have out-of-topic discussions that are not related to resource policies. So a gentle nudge to those people who have brought off-topic or non-policy related discussions to that list helps. all right? So helps bring sanity. And that's why what we try to do is encourage the community. We're reaching out to you here. There are some guidelines that you can follow so that you have a sane discussion or decent discussion about resource policies when you focus on the policies. So those, at least on the RPD mailing list, well, we hope that things will work out. Now the technical community, if you leave the environment, then there is a problem. If you leave the RPD mailing list, then there is a problem because you are the subject matter experts on some of those. I mean, I know about RPKI, but Andrew, I think you are an expert at RPKI. We have Ben Madison here who can talk much better about that. So so for technical subjects, on technical topics, when you have some objections, but that when you go through them and it doesn't make technical sense, so it's up to the informed members of the community to come forward, right? So all I'm going to ask you is, there are some mailing lists that you should not leave, at least the resource policy discussion mailing list and the members discuss mailing list, or the AFRI V6 or the other mailing lists that we have. Please don't leave them. And as much as we have a code of conduct, it's also up to us, okay, up to the community to adhere to that code of conduct, all right? Show them that there is a better way of behaving. Now, I know there is, well, I also saw it, the communities discuss mailing list was moderated. Now, as much as it's moderated, your mailbox, if you're on that mailing list, your mailbox will not get inundated with whatever has been sent because it's under moderation. So someone or a group of people are actually looking at it. But the unmoderated are archived on the website. So they are there. If you want to know who's putting what, it's there. You just have to go look for it, but it's not coming to your mailbox at the moment. So this is the situation as is. But technical community, that's why one of the reasons why I wanted to be here is you should not leave the mailing list, all right? But actually, well, if I want to make noise, all right, if you shout louder than I am, that's not going to solve the problem. But trying to direct or focus the discussion on the topic at hand may help. So finally, I'll find like, oh, what I'm saying, they are talking much more sense than I am. So I may keep quiet, right? So we have to build this. It's not going to come just like a top-down. Yes, we can enforce, all right, but what? We're going to employ someone who will be looking at all the mails and processing it? Well, it can be done, but I don't think it's a good utilization of resources, all right? Thank you very much. I don't know. Questions we can take at tea time or until tomorrow, all right? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Madhvi.